Welcome back to Let's Play Choose Your Own Adventure. Today's book, Choose Your Own Adventure number 14, The Forbidden Castle by Edward Packard, illustrated by Paul Granger. Now this book, just so you know, is actually the sequel to The Cave of Time. It's pretty cool that they do a sequel for something like a Choose Your Own Adventure book, but that's what we got here. And this is actually my favorite Choose Your Own Adventure book. Page 1. You promised yourself never to go back into the Cave of Time. But when you found the opening behind a big boulder in Red Creek Canyon, you couldn't resist. The cave seemed darker than before. You slipped and fell. Your head hit something, and now here you are, lying in a field, looking up into the branches of a big oak tree with no idea of where you are or even what century it might be. Now you may never see your family and friends again. Rubbing your aching head, you take in the scene around you. Nearby, you see a narrow dirt road, and beyond it, a fast-running brook. The road disappears into dense woods on either side of the field. You hear the sound of hooves and a strange clanking noise. Someone's coming. You duck behind a tree as two men on horseback ride toward you. They're wearing shining metal armor. One of them carries a white banner with a golden lion on it. They must be knights. You watch as they rein in their horses and dismount just a few yards away. "It has been a long ride, Sir Rupert," says the taller one, "and you have had a long time to think. Tell me, have you solved the riddle of the Forbidden Castle?" "In truth, Sir Godfrey, I have tried, and so has everyone else in England." "What a reward King Henry has offered! Half the kingdom of Wales." "A handsome reward indeed," Sir Godfrey replies, "but not an over-generous one, for the old monk promised King Henry that if he conquered the Forbidden Castle, he would rule all of Europe." The knights fill their flasks with water from the stream. As they walk back to their horses, Sir Godfrey says, "We must get on to Cotwin Castle. The king expects us before the sun passes behind the west tower. He will be angry if we are late." "Aye," says Sir Rupert, as he vaults onto his horse. "The king has been in a fearsome temper since he learned that there have been foreign spies in the English court. And now he has ordered that all suspicious-looking travellers shall be locked in the dungeon." As the knights prepare to ride off, you wonder whether you should come out from behind the tree. You're wearing 20th century clothing. Surely you'll look suspicious to these knights. On the other hand, you can't stay hidden forever. 20th century clothing, yes, this is an old book. Came out 1982. If you decide it would be wiser to wait for the next passerby, turn to page 4. If you decide to step out from your hiding place, turn to page 6. Let's stay hidden. That seems like the smart thing to do. You decide to wait. As the knights ride out of sight, you hear a deep voice behind you. "Are you going to stand behind that tree all day?" Turning, you look up into the eyes of a giant of a man. He's wearing leggings and a tunic made from deerskin. He holds a bow in one hand. A quiver filled with arrows is strapped over one shoulder. "You don't want King Henry's knights to see you, eh?" He laughs and adds, "Then you're a friend to me. Those puppets give me more trouble than they're worth." He bends down and looks closely at your face. "My word, I've never seen the likes of you in these woods." I'm a stranger from another place and another time," you say. "Could you tell me what year it is?" The giant laughs again. "I don't keep count," he says, "and I've never seen why anyone else should. Garth is my name, and you can stay with me if you like." "Where do you live?" you ask. Garth answers with a wave of his arm. "My house is the whole wide forest. There's plenty of food and plenty to do. It's the only place where a person can be free." "Why not join me?" "Of course, if you're bothered by a little rain and wind now and then, you can follow that road to Cotwin Castle. They'll give you a roof over your head. I must warn you, though, it might be the roof of a dungeon." If you decide to go with Garth, turn to page 7. If you decide to try your luck at Cotwin Castle, turn to page 9. Let's head off to Cotwin Castle. You thank Garth for his offer, bid him farewell, and set out for Cotwin Castle. You have not gone far when you see a woman coming down the road. She's hunched over, almost hidden by her black shawl. As she walks alongside a wooden cart loaded with hay and pulled by a little gray horse. If you let her pass and continue on toward Cotwin Castle, turn to page 14. If you stop the woman, turn to page 16. All right, let's let her pass, continue on toward Cotwin Castle. You follow the road for what feels like miles, wondering whether you'll ever find your way to Cotwin Castle or even find food and shelter by nightfall. The sun is beginning to set when a traveler comes riding toward you, his cloak billowing behind him. Where are you headed? He calls to you as he reins in his horse. You like his warm brown eyes and the impish expression on his weather-beaten face. I'm looking for Cotwin Castle. Am I heading the right way? You ask. Indeed, you have been heading the wrong way, he says. But that's a good thing for you. If you were ever to reach Cotwin Castle, they'd surely throw you in the dungeon. Because of the clothes you're wearing, they'd think you're possessed by evil spirits. Evil spirits? You're surprised that anyone could imagine you to be possessed by evil spirits. Then you remember that in medieval times, evil spirits were often blamed for unusual happenings. What am I to do? You ask. Just keep going. You're only a mile or so from a fishing village. When you get there, ask for Stephen. Tell him that his brother Luke sent you. You can stay with him and his wife. They'll teach you how to catch any fish in the sea. You call your thanks to Luke as he rides off, waving over his shoulder. You continue on your way and soon reach a hilltop. Although it's nearly dark, you can see the fishing village below. No more than a dozen houses, each with a little garden nestled by the harbor. Beyond it lies the blue-gray sea. You can see 3 small boats sailing homeward with the day's catch of fish. You think about the life ahead of you. A simpler life than the one you thought you'd have without books or TV or movies, planes or cars, or a million other things you took for granted. On the other hand, there's no pollution, no car wrecks, no bombs. And there will be plenty of excitement, fishing and sailing. Will life be better or worse than in your own century? The end? Yep, it ends right there. That's one of the shorter endings, and not a very satisfying one, because it's not really clear, what's going to happen next. And we didn't find the castle, so let's go back to the beginning and try again. Okay, so back at the beginning, we're hiding behind the tree, and there are 2 knights. Should we stay behind the tree, or should we go out and talk to the knights? Well, we know that if we stay behind the tree, then we'll meet Garth. So if we do that, Garth suggests we can go with him, or we can go to Cotwin Castle. So let's go with Garth and see what happens. You've always wanted to learn how to live in the wilderness. This seems like the perfect chance. You follow Garth as he leads you through pine forests, across roaring brooks, and up steep rock ledges. The sun has dipped below the western hills when you reach a shelter under a rock ledge. You help him gather sticks and pine boughs, and you're soon warming your hands before a blazing fire. Why do you live in the woods like this, you ask? He grins. Ever since I told King Henry that he was no better a man than anyone else, he's had a price on my head. He's lost 5 of his best knights trying to bring me to the gallows. Before I met you, I overheard his knights talking about some riddle. Do you know anything about it? Yes, and it is quite a story, says Garth. About a year ago, an old monk visited the king and told him about a mysterious castle. Of course, the king demanded to know where this castle is, but the monk would not tell. Instead, he recited a strange riddle and then said, Who solves the riddle will find the castle, and who conquers the castle will rule all Europe. Ever since then, King Henry has been trying to solve the riddle. He is angry because none of his wise men can do so. Do you know the answer to the riddle? Garth laughs. I don't even know the riddle. If you want to find out, you must gain admittance to King Henry's court. You may succeed, but if they suspect you are a runaway serf, they'll have you thrown in the dungeon. You have no way of knowing what may lie in store at Cotwin Castle, but it's risky staying with Garth. He said himself that the king's knights are searching for him. If you decide to try your luck at Cotwin Castle, turn to page 12. If you stay with Garth, turn to page 11. Cotwin Castle. Garth wishes you good luck as you shake hands and say goodbye. As you trudge along the dusty road, your heart is lightened by the sight of flowering trees, the cheerful songs of birds, and the smells of the sweet summer air. The afternoon sun is hot when you reach a broad, sloping meadow. You can see Cotwin Castle perched on the next hill. Its high stone walls and towers look like a scene from a picture book, or even a choose-your-own-adventure book. A bugle sounds as you approach the ramparts. The great oak gate swings open, and 3 knights gallop forth. They rein in their horses beside you. Without a word, one of them lifts you up on his horse, while another prods you with his sword. Turn to page 10. You cling to the horse, trying to keep from falling off, as the knights gallop to the castle yard. They drag you down a long flight of crumbling stairs. One of them opens a creaking iron gate, and another shoves you into a dark, musty room. The gate swings shut behind you. The floor of your new quarters is rock. There are no windows, only a few cracks in the walls that provide barely enough light for you to see your cellmate crouching in the corner. He's very thin, and his grimy hair hangs halfway down to his hips. Keep away from me, he shouts. Your clothes were made by the devil. Don't come near me. Please don't be afraid, you say. I won't hurt you, but do you know what they'll do with me? Most prisoners are beheaded, but if you're found guilty, they'll burn you at the stake. It is the only way to purge the devil from your soul. He steps closer. Don't worry. If you're innocent, you won't burn. You have only a few moments before your fate is sealed. Maybe the guards can help you. If you ask the guards to tell you the riddle of the Forbidden Castle, turn to page 17. If you ask them about what sort of trial you might have, turn to page 20. What will happen at the trial, you ask? Do not worry, one of the guards replies. If you are not in league with the devil, you will go free. They lead you out into the courtyard. It is filled with knights and ladies, except for a large area in the middle where a pile of wood is neatly stacked. How does this trial proceed, you ask one of the guards. It's simple, he says. They tie you to the stake and light the fire. If you're guilty, you'll burn. If you're innocent, you will not be harmed. You try to run for it, but the guards quickly grab you. Step by step, they march you to your doom. The end. Yeah, I kind of knew that would be a bad choice, but And anyway, this book is called The Forbidden Castle, so let's find out what would have happened if we'd asked them what the riddle is. Please, you ask the two guards, tell me the riddle of the Forbidden Castle. The taller one looks down at you, a stupid grin on his face, and pushes you through the crowd of people gathered in the courtyard. Knights and ladies in colorful robes are laughing and calling to each other. In the center of the courtyard is a pile of wood stacked around a pole. A man stands next to the pole holding a coil of rope in one hand and a knife in the other. The tall guard leans toward you. The Lord Chancellor will allow a final request before you're tied to the stake. He points to a man whose dark gray cloak reaches to his ankles. May I make a last request? You ask. The Chancellor looks at you coldly. What is it? Tell me the riddle of the Forbidden Castle. Little good it will do you, he says, but it is a simple enough request. He steps closer and looks at you curiously. Then he says, somewhere south, where it is colder, where that which falls stays where it is, you'll find what isn't what it is. As you stand there trying to figure out the riddle, the executioner steps forward with his coil of rope. You have only a minute left to live. Escape is impossible. Suddenly, the guards press you up against the stake. The rough, prickly rope pulls tight against your waist. You must say something now. If you ask for a little time to solve the riddle, turn to page 25. If you say, stop, I have the solution to the riddle, turn to page 28. Stop, I have the solution to the riddle. The executioner laughs. He waves his lighted torch before your eyes. Suddenly, the Chancellor steps forward. Stop the execution, he says in a loud voice. But, the executioner cries, the prisoner's just stalling for time. That may be, says the Chancellor, but the prisoner is like none we've seen before. Perhaps this is a wizard. This stranger may be the one person who can answer the riddle. The knights and ladies begin to chant, to the stake! To the stake! But the Chancellor leads you out of the courtyard and through an archway, beyond which is a large oak door guarded by two men with heavy swords and shields. One of them opens the door, and the Chancellor leads you to a large octagonal room lightened by casement windows over each of the rough stone walls. At the far end of a long oak table sits King Henry himself. He looks at you curiously as he strokes his long pointed beard. We have never been so happy as when we learned that you have the solution to the riddle, he says. So tell us what it is. You have been desperately trying to think of a solution. You think of the first line of the riddle. Somewhere south where it is colder. At least you have a couple of ideas. Normally it'll be warmer, not cooler if you go south. But the mountains may be cooler, even though they're farther south. And of course, the coldest place of all is the South Pole. Well, the king leans forward impatiently. If you say the Forbidden Castle is to the south, but high in the mountains where it's cold, turn to page 34. If you say the Forbidden Castle is to the south on the way to the South Pole, turn to page 36. The Forbidden Castle is to the south, you say, on the way to the South Pole, where it is cold. The king rises, his face reddening with anger. What nonsense are you telling me? What is this South Pole you speak of? Suddenly, you realize that the South Pole can't mean anything to the king. It won't be reached for hundreds of years. You try to come up with an explanation, but the king roars at his guards. They pick you up like a sack of potatoes and carry you through the door. "Prepare for execution," the king calls, "and be quick about it." The end. Yeah, so this is a fun book, but it's also a very difficult one. There are only a few endings in which you succeed at getting to the Forbidden Castle. So for me, it makes the quest more meaningful, but it also means that you're going to die a lot. So let's go back and see what would have happened if we'd taken the other choice. The Forbidden Castle is to the south, you say, but high in the mountains where it's cold. The king begins to pace around the room. Your heart is pounding. Will he praise you or send you to your death? Suddenly he turns, smiling. There is wisdom in what you say. I know that in the south of France there are mountains higher than any in England, and their tops are covered with snow, while flowers bloom in the valleys below. Now what is the rest of this solution? You think about the next line of the riddle. Where that which falls stays where it is. But you can hardly even guess at the solution. Could it have something to do with the setting sun? The sun falls below the horizon, but really stays where it is. If you say the second line has to do with the setting sun, turn to page 42. If you say, we must first go to the southern mountains, and then I'll be able to tell you, turn to page 43. You look the king in the eye and try to sound as if you know what you're talking about. We see the sun fall below the horizon when it sets because the earth is turning. The sun itself stays where it is. What do you mean the earth turns? The king points his finger at you. You would try to make a fool of me. What you speak is heresy. Anyone can see that the earth does not move. It is the sun that travels around the earth every day. If only you could show the king that he's wrong, but the guards quickly seize you and drag you back to the dungeon. You wonder if you'll ever get out. You don't. The end. Yeah, this is a tough story. Let's go back. Try again. We must first go to the southern mountains, you say. Then I will be able to tell you. The king frowns. He heaves a sigh and says, Very well. I shall provide a ship which will take you to France. A day and a half's voyage from Dover, given a fair wind. There shall go with you the Earl of Kent and 3 of my best knights. Meanwhile, I shall gather my army together, enough men to conquer any castle, and we shall follow within the week. Soon all of Europe will be mine. He smiles a broad smile. Then, pointing his finger at you, he says, But if you do not find the Forbidden Castle, I will see you hang from the tallest tree in England. Taking care to speak in the manner of the court, you say, Never fear, my lord. I shall find the castle before the next full moon. Then, as the monk foretold, all Europe shall do homage to your sword. Well spoken, says the king. Now make ready, lords, knights, and vassals. We journey to France. Turn to page 57. You spend half of the next day floating down the Thames River on the royal barge. It docks in London, and though you're eager to see the ancient city, the Earl of Kent has other plans. He swings you up onto his horse and begins riding toward the southern shore. The smell of the fresh sea breeze and the flocks of gulls circling overhead tell you that you have arrived in Dover, where one of King Henry's ships is waiting to take you across the English Channel. You're glad to be safe for the moment, but you keep thinking about what will happen to you if you can't find the Forbidden Castle. The more you think about it, the more you think you'd better escape. Early the next morning, you, the Earl, and 3 of his knights set sail on one of the royal ships. The voyage is a smooth one, and shortly before noon the next day, you step onto the fertile soil of France. The Earl of Kent and his knights mount their powerful war horses. You are ordered into the back of a wooden cart. Though the ride is bumpy and you'd rather be on one of the horses, you begin to enjoy the beautiful countryside. It is late afternoon when you come to a tavern. We will stop here, the Earl calls to the driver. It is time to load our casks with good French wine. You will wait here. We will not be long. They step inside, and you are alone with the driver. He climbs down and walks ahead to check the horse's harness. As he tightens a leather strap, you realize this may be your only chance to escape. You survey the scene around you. Open pasture land lies on both sides of the road, and there's no place to hide. Unless you make it to the bridge 100 yards or so down the road, the land beyond it is thickly wooded. If you decide to jump out and run for it, turn to page 62. If you decide to seize the reins and urge the horses forward, turn to page 63. All right, let's ride out of here with style. You reach forward, grab the whip from the side of the cart, and take the reins. You crack the whip overhead, and the horses lunge forward, knocking the driver to the ground. As the heavy wooden wheels roll past, he scrambles for the side of the cart. You bring the whip down again, shouting, but the driver has climbed into the cart. Suddenly, one burly hand is on your shoulder, the other grabs the reins and slows the horses from their run. You are filled with dread as he steers the cart back to the cavern where the knights are waiting. So, my little friend, said the Earl, you would betray the king. Our search for the forbidden castle will continue as soon as you are hanged. The rest of your adventure is too sad to tell. The end. Wow, I'm seeing kind of a pattern with this book. It's, you choose or you die. You make the right choice or you die. You make the right choice or you die. You make the right choice or you die. You know, as much as I might love the goal of this book, I'm realizing that as a game book, maybe it's not as good as I remember. You see, ideally with a choose your own adventure book, each choice would lead to a new story, but these choices all just seem to lead to more ways to die. Well, let's go back and see what the other choice would have led to. If you decide to jump out and run for it, turn to page 62. You jump out of the cart and race down the road. The bridge up ahead spans a swiftly flowing river. The woods beyond it should offer you a good hiding place, but maybe you could throw Henry's men off the track by doubling back and hiding behind the tavern itself. If you try to make it across the bridge, turn to page 65. If you run behind the tavern until you can decide what to do next, turn to page 67. Let's go for the bridge. Oh, well, that's promising. You run as fast as you can. As you reach the bridge, you look back toward the tavern. The Earl of Kent and his knights are galloping toward you, their swords drawn. You force yourself to run even faster. Your heart is pounding. As you start across the narrow bridge, you hear the horses right behind you, and you jump! Your right leg hits a jagged boulder. Then you feel only the shocking numbness of the icy water. You struggle to keep your head above water. You gasp for air. The racing current sweeps you downstream. Again and again, the swirling black water pulls you under. You're barely conscious now. The current has swept you against a fallen tree. The water is calmer. You work your way ashore and crawl up the steep, muddy slope. As you reach the tall grass along the bank, you collapse. Your leg is bleeding, and you feel so exhausted and bruised that you hardly care whether or not you're alive. That's a good thing, because in a minute you won't be. The end. I'm not sure exactly what killed me that time. It might have been exposure, it might have been blood loss. Either way, you're dead. What a shock. So, let's run behind the tavern until we can decide what to do next. You dash around the side of the tavern, keeping as low as you can, so as not to be seen through the casement windows. As you round the rear corner, you almost crash into a young girl with the longest braids you've ever seen. What are you running from? She asks, but she gives you no time to answer. My name's Michelle. I live in the tavern. Come, I'll show you where to hide. You follow her down a steep flight of stone steps through a dark passageway and into a small room filled with casks of wine. The only light comes from a few cracks between the stones in the wall. I will bring you food and milk when it's safe, she says. Then she turns and hurries up the stairs. You sit in the cellar, wondering what will become of you. When will Michelle return? You'd like to sneak upstairs and get some food, but you don't dare. King Henry's knights will surely be looking for you. A few minutes later, the door swings open, and Michelle steps in, carrying a plate heaped with food. Lamb, pears, and fresh bread, she says. The cook is a friend of mine. I've good news, too. The English knights have left. They think you're hiding in the woods. Go to page 68. While you eat, you tell Michelle about everything that's happened since you arrived in England hundreds of years before your birth. She listens intently, and when you have finished, she says, It is a strange story you tell, but I am very glad you have come. My parents died when I was a small child. The innkeeper said I could live at the inn if I swept the floors and helped the cook. Now he works me night and day and beats me if I complain. I have been afraid to run away alone, but we can go together. How? The cook will give us packs of food. I will take blankets and 2 good horses. The moon will be full tonight. We will ride the road south. There's just one more thing. You cannot expect to hide from anyone in those clothes. See what I brought? She hands you a small bundle. Put these on. It is near midnight when Michelle comes to get you. A few moments later, the 2 of you gallop down the road, free. For 2 days, you and Michelle ride the trail south, stopping only long enough to get some sleep and let your horses rest. On the morning of the 3rd day, you reach a fork in the trail where you meet a shepherd. Good morning, friend, you say. Could you tell us which trail will take us south to the mountains? The shepherd looks at you quizzically and shakes his head. I could not say, except to say we cannot go south by going south. What new riddle is this? Michel demands. It is no riddle, the shepherd replies, but a simple truth. For to the south of us lies no man's forest, where the trails are blocked by thickets and thorns, and deadly snakes await you underfoot and above, dangling from the trees. So if you want to go south, you first must go east or west. What lies to the west, you ask? The shepherd frowns and says, The trail to the west winds up around high rocky hills where the January wind blows in July, and the dragon of the ledges waits for foolish travelers. And to the east? Asks Michel. To the east are the lands of the Count Gaston, where half the wolves in Europe roam. You and Michel exchange glances. We cannot turn back now, she says. We must go east or west. They both sound bad to me. If you head west, turn to page 71. If you head east, turn to page 73. Let's go west. You and Michel follow the trail to the west, which winds around the steep hillside. The sun is beginning to set when you see a rambling building made of stones and logs. Wildflowers and ferns are growing on the sod-covered roof. Goats and sheep graze nearby. This must be a monastery, Michel says. But look, someone's using it as a farm. As she speaks, a man walks out of the building. And who are you? He asks. We are travelers from the north, says Michel. And who are you? Auguste Le Bon, he replies, late of service to the Prince of Leon, but now I tend this farm for the philosopher knights. Auguste takes you inside and gives you bread and cheese and warm broth. He tells you that the philosopher knights spend most of their time studying philosophy and playing chess, but they are at present visiting the court of the Prince of Leon, who it seems fears an invasion by Henry, the King of England. Naturally, he has called upon the philosophers for advice, says Auguste. Auguste asks if you would like to spend the night, and you and Michel gratefully accept. In the morning, you ask Auguste if he thinks you can safely get past the dragon of the ledges. I cannot answer that, he says, for I have never known anyone to try. But I know of a secret trail through no man's forest. It is possible to get through safely, though there is great risk. I will be glad to show you the way, if you like. Whichever route you take, you must travel on foot, for the dragon trail is too steep and rugged, and the trail through the forest is sometimes no more than a tunnel through the thorns. Michel beckons you aside. What do you think? She says. You're tempted to choose the dragon trail. After all, you're from the 20th century, and you know the dragons never really existed. On the other hand, If you decide to go through no man's forest, turn to page 74. If you decide to take the dragon trail, turn to page 77. Or, if you decide to wait at the farm until the philosophers return, turn to page 78. No man's forest it is. Ooh, doesn't look good. You and Michel follow Auguste through a forest of towering pines. Late in the day, you reach a slow-moving, muddy stream. A huge fallen tree forms a bridge across it. Beyond the stream are the thickest woods you've ever seen. You can camp here for the night, says Auguste. The trail through no man's forest begins at the other end of the bridge. If you start out at dawn and travel at a good pace, you will be safely through the forest by sunset. But do not stop to rest. The snakes come out at night. Early the next morning, you and Michel carefully cross the bridge and set out on the trail through no man's forest. You follow a twisting route which winds around great clumps of thorns and plunges down into gullies and up steep ridges. Each of you carries a stick to brush aside the thorn branches which hang down across the path. You walk briskly along without rest until the sun sinks low in the western sky and the forest grows darker. If only you knew how much further you had to go. I'm so tired I can barely walk, says Michel. Can we stop for just a few moments? If you agree to rest for a few minutes, turn to page 116. If you insist on pushing on, turn to page 118. That's the last page in the book. And that's where we're going. Last page in the book. We can't stop now, you say. It will be dark soon. You hurry along the trail, slowing only to push the thorny branches aside. But darkness comes quickly in no man's forest. You strain to see each turn in the trail. Then suddenly, it grows lighter up ahead. A few quick steps and you yell for joy. Michel, we made it! Ahead of you is a field of golden grain. On the hillside beyond is a stone cottage. Nearby, a peasant woman is hoeing a small garden. You and Michelle run toward her, and she looks up from her work. Can you give us some food? Michelle says. We are lost and hungry. I would like to help you, but I am a poor serf, says the woman. I work for the lord of the manor. He is a cruel man. Look, there are 2 of his knights now. She points to 2 men riding straight toward you. Right now, you're too weary and hungry to resist. What can we do? Michelle asks. You look at her and manage to smile. We've been through a lot, and we've learned a lot. Someday we shall escape, and we shall find the Forbidden Castle. The end. Well, sad to say, we still didn't find the Forbidden Castle. At least we didn't die that time. And the ending is kind of nice in that it sort of encourages me to, write a new ending for what happened next. If there were Choose Your Own Adventure then had a spin-off where you got to flesh out the endings. But that's all for now. Perhaps someday I'll try again. Maybe we'll get to the castle that time. But for now, it's the end.